You are now tuned into the Anxious Ambition podcast, where you'll be hearing raw and unfiltered conversations with those who struggle with mental illness but refuse to let that get in the way of them achieving their dreams. Our hope is that by hearing their stories, you are inspired to do more. Here are their stories.
Anxious Ambition.
Welcome back to another episode of the Anxious Ambition podcast. Today's guest is currently in Germany, living out his dream of playing professional volleyball. His path hasn't been easy, as he suffered a few injuries and mental hurdles along the way. He's now one of the founding members of Off the Court. Off the Court is an initiative that focuses on providing information and resources to help athletes with not only their mental health, nutrition, but also recovery. Here to share his story, Dalton Solbrig. Welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited.
Of course. Hey, so give everyone a little bit of backstory. I mean, so you're in Germany now, but you grew up in Illinois, went to college in Hawaii, and now you're in Germany. Kind of walk me through how that journey happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we can start when I started playing volleyball, it was pretty much back in high school. Both of my parents were actually swimmers. So there was really no kind of like person in my family that was a great volleyball player that kind of inspired me to want to walk down that path. I played basketball, baseball as a kid, kind of like the classic American sports.
Yep.
I never played football.
Yep.
Yeah. Never played football. My mom was a little worried about concussions. But I'm glad she was.
Right.
And so I started playing volleyball, probably about my freshman year of high school. I started playing club about the summer before that. My older brother started like a year before I did. He's 2 years older than me. And then my dad would actually go and play just for fun in kind of like a 6-on-6 sand bar league with just some coworkers. And my brother and I, when we were kids, we'd mess around. We'd find a volleyball that's just sitting somewhere and mess around with it. And we kind of just really liked it. We liked watching it. We liked, started watching. We would watch in the Olympics. We would start watching like beach volleyball competitions. We would start going to like high school, college games. Carthage College up in Wisconsin, we would go and watch a lot of their games when we were younger. And that kind of just inspired me to start playing volleyball. And so I picked it up my freshman year. And yeah, I was definitely taller. And being from the Midwest, I'm sure the people that live there kind of know that men's volleyball is kind of still on the rise. It's been booming these last couple of years, which is really awesome to see. But back when I was in high school, I mean, it was every year it was kind of a question about cutting the men's volleyball program at a lot of the schools in my area. I mean, that's just kind of how it was. You didn't really get many kids to come out and try out for it. A lot of times you had to kind of combine teams. So if you're a freshman, hopefully you're good enough to play on JV, because a lot of times there weren't enough freshmen for a freshman team, things like that. But yeah, I think I was pretty good. I kind of picked up the sport right away. I was always pretty coordinated. I played other sports, so I had good hand-eye coordination, and that's a really big thing you need for volleyball. And I kind of just continued down that path. I got better and better every season of high school. And it was kind of nice being like, I guess, one of the best players at the high school, because I could kind of play whatever position that I wanted. So it was really, really fun for me. I got, I'm a middle blocker now, but I mean, in high school, I played outside, I played opposite, I played setter, I played every single position pretty much except for libero. And so that was really fun for me to kind of also just get a really good feel for the game and just be able to play at any of those positions. And then probably around my junior year is when it started getting a lot more serious. I moved to a bigger, better club, Adversity Volleyball Club. Anybody who knows, it's a pretty big club in the Midwest area, Chicago area. And so I kind of really wanted to pursue that to play in college. I had a couple D3, D2 colleges reach out to me that year, mostly kind of local schools in the Midwest area. So none of like the huge D1 schools at that time. And then that season of club was kind of like a really breakout season for me. So I got some pretty good offers. I did a couple of visits to Ball State, Ohio State. I visited Harvard, Princeton, and then Hawaii was one of the best visits that I had. So I go on this visit to Hawaii, and anyone who's been to Hawaii knows like it's amazing that the lifestyle, it's paradise for sure. But the biggest thing that sold me, I think, to go to pursue that in college was on my official visit, we went to a women's volleyball game, sold out crowd in the Stan Sheriff Center Arena, 10,300 plus people. And I'm like, I'm a kid from the Midwest, and I'm saying, what the hell are all these people like
Right.
watching volleyball here? What are you guys doing here? And
Yep.
the guys on the team will tell me, yeah, we get not as many fans, but we'll get like 6, 7, 8,000 for most games. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Like, thousands? Like I'm
Right.
used to just seeing like my parents and
Yep.
then my teammates' parents, maybe a couple girlfriends or friends that are there just to hang out.
Yep.
Thousands of people, like, oh man, that I'm sold. And pretty much immediately I was like, yeah, this is where I want to go. And so, yeah, my freshman year, I came there, and my career at Hawaii was pretty interesting. So I never did a red shirt year.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, I kind of wish that I had. It would have been just like an extra year to stay in Hawaii, which would have been awesome.
Right.
But yeah, I think my freshman year, I actually came in as an outside / opposite hitter. And I think 2-3 weeks in, we had one of the starting middles from the last season quit. We had another guy, and then the other freshman who was like, he was recruited as a middle. He was like one of the best middles in the country at in my class. Broke his leg skateboarding on campus. And so the head coach pulled me into his office one day. He's like, you ever played middle? And I was like, yeah, it's kind of the first position I played.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, do you want to play middle for us? And I was like, I mean, I asked him straight. I was like, does that mean I get to be on the travel roster and like on the game roster? He's like, yeah, for sure. You'll be the third guy. And I'm like, let's do it. As a freshman, I'm like, I thought that was kind of my attitude. I think it didn't really matter. Like, I have to be this position. Like for me, it was, I want to be on the court. I want to help the play. That's why I'm here, to play volleyball. So that was a pretty easy decision for me, switching back to being a middle. And then freshman, sophomore year, got a little bit of playing time here and there, not a whole lot. But for me, it was a really great situation to get better. When you're in that situation where you got two guys ahead of you, you have to bust your ass every single day to kind of prove yourself. Mm-hmm. So you have to improve. You have to like grind every day if being on the court is really what you want. And for me, it was. And then finally, my junior year, broke into the starting lineup. Had a couple of really nice seasons there as a starter, junior and senior year. I think there was kind of like a mishap my junior year that prevented us from making it to the NC2A tournament. Basically, there's like a selection process for the at-large bids, and the team that got selected above us, well, it's a little bit biased, but we think that it should have been us for sure. It was a team that we had beaten, like, I think 3 times that season. They only beat us once. So like head to head, but
no, I get it. Political shit.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately we kind of got snubbed that year. And then the next season we had one of the greatest volleyball seasons in history. We had 74 set wins in a row. So we didn't drop a set for up until like our senior night, which is our last home game.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. And, undefeated at home, I think we had won 28 matches in a row. Made it to won the Big West, won the conference championships, played the conference championships with a sold out crowd, which was crazy.
Wow.
Senior night was a sold out crowd. And then we go to the NCAA tournament. We make it all the way to the finals. Unfortunately, we lose to Long Beach in 4 sets. But I mean, overall, just a really incredible season. I mean, we set records with the team. Personally, I set the hitting percentage record for Hawaii. So currently I hold that. Hopefully no one touches that one, so I can have a little piece of history, right, since I was never All-American or anything like that.
Sure.
So that season was just really incredible. And kind of like, to backtrack a little bit, I think probably midway through that senior season is when a couple of my assistant coaches, we had Milan Zarkovic, who's Serbian, like volleyball genius. I mean, he would run all of our trainings, all of our practices. He was just really incredible volleyball mind. Then we had Josh Walker, who played professionally for, I want to say it was 4 or 5 seasons.
Mhm.
And he played in Dubai, Abu Dhabi. He played in some really cool places. And they kind of asked me, he's like, what do you think about, playing professionally? And I was like, to be honest, didn't really think about it yet. So, I mean, up to this point, it wasn't like I'm playing pro for sure, 100%. Like I was always the kind of, I was raised like school comes first.
Mhm.
Get your degree. That's the most important thing. And, I'm super happy that my parents raised me that way, because, now I have a degree. And then if God forbid, knock on wood, that something
Mhm.
happens to me, I have something to fall back on. So yeah, up until this point, it was kind of like finish school, finish strong. And, obviously the rest of my time was volleyball, but more towards the college. Right.
Mhm.
And so I asked him, I was like, well, you think I could do it? And they're like, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many different levels of volleyball over in Europe. And they're like, if you want to go play, like you can go play. We'll help you out. We'll help contact you with getting you in contact with an agent. Obviously everything was legal completely.
Right.
My coaches weren't like, sign with this guy, so I'll get a cut or anything like that.
Right.
Just to clear that.
Right.
But they're like, well, once the season's over, we'll help you out.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, season ends, and I reach out to this Serbian guy who was in contact with my Serbian assistant coach. And he got me this contract to go play in Romania. So that was originally my first contract. Really, really nice contract. I was going to be on a team with a lot of the Serbian national team volleyball players. I think there was going to be 2 other American guys. So it was a really nice contract. And come beginning of August of that summer, so this would be summer of 2019, I get a text from the manager of the club saying basically, we don't have enough money for the volleyball team, so we're going to cut it. It's like, oh shit.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm like, all right, well, I don't really know what to do now. Because, like I said, I wasn't really ever really thinking about playing pro. So I didn't have a
Right.
whole lot of knowledge about how everything works, all the different
Because that's
leagues.
common, right? Like you hear
Yeah.
about like the horror stories of, because I mean, let's be honest, there's no like professional. I mean, there is professional here in the States, but it's not like that full-time job type thing. And you hear it all the time of like, just, I mean, it's such a gamble, of
Yeah.
just
100%.
trusting someone over in Serbia or Croatia or whatever. And I've heard all these stories of
Yeah.
people just not even getting paid and things like that. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a very different world, especially when you're somebody like me who is just like pretty blind to it, like,
Right.
I don't know how to, I don't know how everything works there. I don't know the rules for foreigners. I don't know the rules for visas. I don't know the rules for getting paid and bank accounts and all these different things. I'm like, all right, like, I guess I'm just going to go and figure it out along the way.
Yeah.
And so that didn't work out with the Romanian contract. And there ended up being a little bit of a falling out with that agent, the Serbian agent. And then my current agent, her name's Chiara. She's Italian. If she's watching, love you, Chiara. She's the bomb. Saved my career like multiple times. She's great. Oh, yeah. And she reaches out to me and she kind of just says like, hey, I looked on the portal, which I guess at this time, I didn't know that there was like a portal, like saying where everyone's going. I'm like, she's like, I saw on the portal that you don't have a team. I'm like, I don't know where this portal is, but it's correct. I don't have a team right now.
Yeah.
She said, give me, I'll text you in the morning. And the next morning she's got like 6 different offers for me.
Wow.
And I'm like, how the hell did you do that overnight?
Right.
Like, did you just message like every single team in Europe? Like, how did you do that? Because I mean, there were some from Estonia, Croatia, Portugal, like I think the 2nd or 3rd league in Italy, like just all these random, like,
wow,
how did you do that? That's insane. And so we kind of like whittled it down. I originally decided to go to Estonia. There was another kind of like falling out they just decided to sign somebody else instead of me.
Mm.
And then finally I got this contract to go play in Croatia. And at this, before I signed that one, I was kind of like, had this conversation with my agent. She's like, it's pretty late. You had 2 things fall through already. You're not going to get a lot of money. Like, the competition hopefully will still be good, but this is kind of like the last option. And so for me, I'm like, it's either that or I don't play professionally.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of almost going back to like, some of these horror stories that you hear about guys. If you take a year off, even 1 year, teams look at that like, yeah, we don't know. We haven't seen you play in a year. We're not going to take the risk on you. Right. So I'm thinking, man, if I don't play this year, that's a pretty big risk to kind of take a year off and then try to get back into it. Or, there's the option that somebody over in Europe gets injured at some point in the season and they need to sign a new player. But that's a total, that's a total roll of the dice that even happens. Right.
Right.
So I'm like, yeah, you know what, let's do it. I'm not really doing it for the money. I'm kind of doing it for the experience. I want to play at least one season so that, 5-10 years down the road, I'm like not regretting never playing volleyball professionally. I'm like, let's do it. All right, let's do this thing. And so I go to Croatia. I fly in. I think I landed like 6 days before our first match.
Wow.
So I got there, a month, almost a month and a half later than all the other players. I'm like, all right, let's do this. But I'm still in good shape and everything. That wasn't the issue with any of that because I was training all summer with the intentions to go play pro that next season. So it wasn't nothing to do with being out of shape, but it's pretty intense to kind of like get to know a new setter, new teammates in a week before a game.
And they don't speak English, right?
No. And that was part of it too, is I was the only, not the only foreigner. There was a Serbian guy, which Serbian, Croatian, the languages are almost the same. And then we had an Italian guy that kind of signed right when we got to playoffs. So for a majority of the season, I was the only foreigner. I was the only guy that didn't speak this like Slavic language, which I tried to learn, and it was, oh my God, like impossible to learn. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And so, yeah, that was one of the toughest things about it, was kind of just getting dropped in that country. And I'm like, all right, I'm here to play volleyball. I don't know. Like, there's a couple of guys on my team that can speak decent English, but for a majority of them, it's pretty broken. Like, you can talk to them about volleyball stuff for sure. They know the English words, but anything else, it's kind of like, it's pretty tough to have like a normal conversation like you would have with somebody, one of your friends back home. Right. But it ended up being a really fun season. And I'm really glad that I kind of took that chance, because the lifestyle of playing pro, it can be tough at times, but there's always, it can always come back to like the silver lining of, it's better than being at a desk for 8 hours a day.
Right.
So I immediately kind of fell in love with the lifestyle, kind of just training once, twice a day, and then getting to relax the rest of the day, getting to, explore Europe. And this was the first time I'd ever been to Europe. So I'm like, this is incredible. I get to experience these new cultures, learn a new language. Croatian didn't really go that well, but German is going a little bit better. So it was really, really cool. And then, I decided to keep playing. And so probably around February of that season, that's usually when you kind of look for a new contract. And my agent says, I really want to get you to Germany. Because Germany is kind of known as like the best league for kind of young players to go and develop. It's kind of like the feeder league into France, Poland, sometimes Italy. There's a ton of good young players in Germany. A lot of the teams will play in these international cups like Champions League, CV Cup, Challenge Cup. So you can get really, really good exposure by playing in these international cups. And so my agent's like, I want to put you in Germany somewhere. I'm like, all right, yeah, let's do it. And it was pretty tough the first couple of weeks of that. So I'm about 6'6", but for my position, technically I'm a little undersized, which anybody watching is like 6'6", pretty tall.
Right.
But for me, it's, I'm playing against 7-footers, like 6'10", 6'8", consistently. And so I am a little bit undersized for the position that I play. And that was kind of the thing that the first like 3 or 4 coaches in Germany kind of told my agent, is like, yeah, we're looking for somebody above 2 meters, which is like 6'8".
Sure.
Like, we need somebody above that. We're like, all right, well, I'm really close to that. I mean, I'm like 198 in centimeters, so I'm
Right.
barely under that. And so that was super frustrating, kind of like, even in college, I would play against, guys bigger than me and
Right.
and
It's
play
still
well against
short.
them.
Yeah. It's still shorter, even at collegiate level.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm like, I've proven that I can play.
Mhm.
And finally, my coach this year, Stefan Huebner, who's anybody who knows international volleyball really well, he's one of the greatest middles of all time. I think he was from 2000 to 2010 selected on like the all-decade team as the best middle. He
Wow.
played in the 2000 Olympics for the German national team. Just incredible playing career that he had. He's the coach of this club in Lüneburg, Germany, which is where I am now. And he kind of phone calls me. My agent tells me, he's like, hey, the coach wants to talk to you of this team. It's like, oh, sweet. So I jump on the call with him, and he kind of just like, I love what you do. And, you really remind me a lot of myself when I was a player, which was an incredible honor for him to say something like that. And, a lot of teams, they kind of use middle blocker as very much specific, like you need to be more of a blocker than an attacker. And
Mhm.
I've been kind of the opposite my whole career. I've been more of an attacker than a blocker. Not saying I'm bad at blocking. It's definitely improved a lot over these last few seasons, but that's attacking has kind of always been my strength. And a lot of teams were kind of, we're looking for a guy that just gets a lot of blocks. All right, well, that's kind of just the old school, the way of volleyball. And so my coach is like, we want to run a lot of offense through the middle of the court. I'm like, well,
Hell yeah.
sign me up, dude. Like,
Right.
let's do it. And so I get the offer. I sign it right away. I think the next day. I'm like, I'm not waiting on anything else. Like, I don't want to
Felt right.
risk going anywhere else. My agent says Germany is 100% the best place for you to be. You got an offer from Germany. Like, you should go.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I signed it, and I signed a 2-year contract to play. And yeah, here I am now, still in Germany for my second season. Not sure yet what happens next season. For sure, I'll still play.
Sure.
But yeah, that's kind of everything up until this point.
Awesome. So obviously you said a lot, but I want to get to kind of back it up a little bit. So during this time, like when you like go to Hawaii and you go to all these foreign places, like where are you at mentally at this point? Like, are you just like totally open to being by yourself, not knowing anyone? Like, to me, I'm thinking like, I'll just be so anxious to like go somewhere new, and now you're alone. Like, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of my biggest, I think, fears of, especially going to Hawaii as a senior in high school from the Midwest, and
I went to Iowa and it was like, what the fuck is this place?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so for me, it was kind of, I think, compared to like my brothers, for example, I was always kind of the one that was more, I want to like get out of here and just see something. Not that I was, I really wanted to leave home, because I loved living in the Midwest, but I was always a little bit more kind of, I guess, adventurous in that sense. And so I was kind of, I guess, ready to take that leap. And for anyone out there who's like considering playing sports in college, this is one of the biggest benefits of it, is you get there day one, and you have 20 friends made for you that are the people on your team. And so that part was super easy. I didn't have to worry about, oh man, I'm here all by myself and I got to make friends. Right.
Yep.
I get there and I'm like, I got 20 dudes that I'm going to be forced to hang out with every day for the next 4 years. Like, I'm going to have some friends. Like, I don't got to worry about that. But definitely I was a little bit homesick at times. I mean, it was tough it's such a big change. I mean, just going to college for a high school kid is a big change. And for me, going 2,000 miles away in the middle of the Pacific Ocean was crazy, really, really crazy. And there were times where I was just like, man, I'm really far away from home. Like, and I think sometimes it's tough, especially even now where, I call my parents. I usually call my family every Sunday, and they'll be like, yeah, we just went out to dinner last night with your brothers. And I'm just like, damn, like
Yep.
this is awesome. But sometimes you miss those moments like that, kind of just going out to eat with your family, or, maybe it's a friend from high school's birthday, or the thing that really sucks now is a lot of friends are starting to get married, and I'm going to be
Yeah.
missing a lot of weddings.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to convince all my friends to put weddings, and cousins, like, do it over the summer, please. Like, if you have the choice, do a
Right.
summer wedding. But yeah, I mean, it's for sure it's tough. So I think definitely that time in Hawaii prepared me really well for coming in and playing in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was kind of already used to living on my own, not seeing my family except for the summers and usually a little bit over winter break. So I think I was definitely a little bit more prepared for it. But at the same time, it's difficult when you're kind of just dropped in a place like Europe, where English isn't the first language pretty much anywhere you go. I mean, depending on the country, a lot of people will speak English. Germany is a good example. Like, just about everybody speaks a little bit of English here, especially the younger population.
Okay.
But in a place like Croatia, I mean, certain cities, it'd be like none, like really nobody speaks English.
Wow.
So it's such a big change. Like, you're on your own for one, and you're not with friends and family, and you're also kind of not able to speak your own language with people. You go to a restaurant and you're like, I don't know what any of the food is, so I'm just gonna wing it. You go to go to the grocery store and you're like, I don't know what any of this is called in English. Like, you look for something like flour and you're like, I have no
Sure.
idea what flour is called here. And so just little challenges like that. But yeah, I think, like I said, kind of just the living on my own piece, I think I was pretty prepared for that, just from living in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely there were moments where it was tough. It's kind of really easy to get in like a slump, I think is the best way to put it here, where you kind of go to training, come home, and then you just kind of lay around, watch Netflix, maybe play video games, don't
Mm-hmm.
really do anything productive. And it's not that you have to, right? But
Right.
you kind of just get in that zone. It's just like, yeah, every day's the same. I go to training and I come home, and then I'm lazy, just kind of like watching Netflix, playing video games,
Mm-hmm.
rinse and repeat every day.
Yep.
So that's why, especially the stuff with like off the court and different things that I've kind of like expanded my hobbies into has definitely helped that piece of like living on my own a ton.
So speaking of off the court, first, I want you to explain what it is, but also what made you want to be a part of that? Why are you so passionate about mental health, recovery, and nutrition?
Yeah. So I guess to kind of give you the background of that, I totally got a random phone call over the summer from Faye, who's another one of the founding members. She played volleyball for UT Dallas. She was a setter there for 4 years. She reaches out to me on Instagram, and she kind of just, this was the summer before I came to Germany.
Okay.
And so she kind of reached out and was like, hey, I know that you've had like an injury in the past, because I had it was a pretty minor surgery that I had while I was in Hawaii. I just had a surgery on my foot. I think I was only out for 3 months.
Okay.
So, I mean, compared to like ACL, anything like that, was, in my opinion, more minor. I was only in crutches for like a week.
Sure.
But she reaches out to me. She says, I'm doing this project on like the mental health side of recovering from an injury for her undergraduate like thesis project.
Hmm.
She's like, can I interview you for that? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And whenever people reach out to me, I try to like help them out with anything I can. So like, yeah, for sure. Like, you can interview me. Like, we'll talk about it. And so I do this interview with her, and I kind of go through all of the different, I guess, advice that I had as a player, as well as somebody who, as an athlete, you experience teammates getting injured. I mean, that's just a part of sports,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I kind of shared a little bit of my experiences in that as well. And the interview went great. We hit it off. Like, she is a really close friend of mine now. And yeah, obviously we started this new company together. And
Mm-hmm.
a few weeks later, I'm in Germany, and I get a phone call from her again. And she goes, she works for a marketing company in Dallas, and her boss, I guess, caught wind of the project she was doing. So CEO of a big marketing company.
Wow.
And she's like, you should like do something with that project, like something bigger. She's like, really? She's like, yeah, I'll help you out. I'll help you guys out with whatever you need, like figuring out how to start a business, all these different logistical things, like all the ins and outs of the legal part of starting a company.
Mm-hmm.
And so she calls me, she's like, hey, do you want to like be my partner on this? And I was like, really? Like, for sure. Absolutely. Like, let's do something. Let's like, and so it didn't really take shape, I think, until the next summer is when, you know, we were kind of just brainstorming all year. Like, this is what we want to do. Like, let's start doing research on how we're going to do it. How we want to do our social media, how we want to do, like physical events, like doing some clinics, which is one thing that we did over this last summer.
Okay.
And then eventually I reached out to James Anastasiades, who is, he's from Cyprus, but he lived in California for pretty much high school until he went to college. And then he played with me at Hawaii for 4 years. He's currently still there. He's he was the manager of the team. And now he does a lot of work with like the TV and like color commentary and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so he's getting his master's right now in sports and exercise physiology. And so I reached out to him because we kind of have the recovery part of it. And if James is kind of just like the guy that he'll talk to anybody, he's always got ideas bouncing around in his head. So I was like, he's a good guy to call about, you know, about like talking about this stuff. And we just had such a good conversation. The three of us were like, James, you got to help us out, dude. Like, you got to be a part of this too. And so that's when we kind of brought James in. And then it kind of took shape into what it is now, which is off the court. And yeah, to put it really simply is we kind of realized how little there is in terms of like education on mental health, nutrition, and recovery. And those are the things that they aren't the things that you worry about while you're at practice or while you're at the game, but they directly influence your performance 100%. Absolutely. And so it kind of became like, we want to increase your performance on the court by taking care of all these things off the court. And that's kind of where the name came from.
First of all, the name is super clever.
Thanks,
who came up with it?
It was me, actually. You should have seen that. I mean, if you saw the list of other ideas, you would laugh at probably 90% of them. So I'm glad that one is good.
I hear you. I think that's always how it is. Like, you have that one idea, and it's like all these crazy other ones. It's like, let's just stick with this.
I remember going through the list with Faye, and she's just like laughing at all of them. And then we finally hit off the court. She's like, wait, that one's nice. That one's good. Yeah, let's do that one. Yeah, and then that's how we got that name.
So what kind of struggles have you had with your mental health?
So this is a pretty complex one for me because I didn't really have any issues when I was in college, when I was in high school.
Okay.
Or at least not to the point. And I think part of it is the lack of education. Is if I was having some issues, I probably just didn't really know, you know?
Yep.
I thought maybe I was just in a bad mood that day or something like that. And I think it wasn't until the season in Croatia when I kind of talked about like being in that slump for a little while, where, like I said, it was just the same exact thing every day. Like, go to training, come home, Netflix, go to training, come home, Netflix, or playing video games or something like that. And at one point I kind of like took a step back and I was like, man, I'm like really not enjoying that much right now. And it was tough. You know, like I said before, I don't have any like really close friends on the team because anytime we would do anything with the team, everybody's kind of talking in Croatian to each other. And I'm kind of just sitting there like, just kind of cruising and then just waiting until someone speaks English. And I'm like, oh shit, they're probably talking to me. All right, here we go. I can be part of the conversation now. And so it was tough to have like a social life. And you know, huge shout out to my teammates that year. You know, they would always try to like bring me out, go into the clubs, go into bars, go into like different events. Like, they're like, I know you don't speak the language, but we're going to at least try to make you have fun. But at times it's tough. You know, you're in a completely different time zone than all your friends. You're in a completely different time zone than your family. It's impossible. Like, you don't have that daily connection with somebody who you can just kind of talk to, and you kind of take it for granted, to be honest. Just that ability to talk about anything, you know, to talk about the girl you saw the other day at the grocery store, and because those are the kinds of conversations you can't really have with somebody that's not a native English speaker or doesn't speak English to, you know, a good level. And so definitely that kind of opened my eyes and to kind of like, man, I'm not really sleeping that well. I'm kind of always like in a kind of irritable mood. And I'm always kind of just like, fuck this. Like, I'm just going to go watch Netflix. I don't want to do anything today.
Yeah. Unmotivated.
Yeah, completely. And I think the motivation was always there for sports.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've always had the ability to, like, no matter how I'm feeling, kind of leave everything at the door, walk in the gym, and get to work with sports. And so that kind of just, I just took that step back and realized, like, man, I'm not really like kind of my old joyful self. And so that was my first experience with it. And then I kind of started doing some different research. I started like kind of changing my hobbies. So instead of coming home and watching Netflix, I would throw on a podcast, like a health and fitness podcast or something like that, something that I find some interest in, or maybe it's something about like investing, because I've been, pretty interested in that, or just throwing on some music and just kind of just chilling, or going for a walk, all these different things. And I kind of noticed my mood would start to improve, like doing just a bunch of different things like music and going for walks and kind of exploring things and doing my own research on like health. That was one of the reasons that I'm so passionate now about health and fitness, was starting to listen to these podcasts and getting myself educated, especially on like nutrition and recovery. Because even as a college kid, I'm looking back, I'm like, if I knew the stuff in college that I know now about recovery and nutrition, like, shoot, I would have been a way better athlete.
Oh yeah.
And so I kind of just started pushing those hobbies to something for me that was a little bit more productive, and immediately that helped. And then I think the biggest struggle was probably last season with injuries. So to kind of outline the whole season, I'm sure you know what Wapaka is, the big grass tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I played in Wapaka that summer and broke my ankle in the quarterfinal match.
And this is after your first season in Germany?
This is after my first season in Croatia.
Okay. Croatia.
So this is right before my first season in Germany. So I break my ankle at Wapaka. So I'm out for the first 6 weeks of the season. And so already not off to a good start, right?
No.
And so, anybody who's had like an injury like that knows that time that you're resting. So I had to like stay off my feet for 6 to 8 weeks.
Wow.
It takes like another 6 to 8 weeks to get back to like 100% playing shape. Like it's not a very fast process. And, so it really took me a while to kind of get back to, where I was as a player before that injury happened. And, then a couple, I don't know, maybe like 2 weeks after I personally felt like, all right, I'm back. Let's do this. I got a really bad throat infection that ended up lasting for like 14 days. And I was on almost a full month of antibiotics. And obviously, you can't train when you're on antibiotics. And so I'm out for a whole nother month from being sick. And again, like even after that, it takes 1, 2, 3 weeks to kind of get back into shape, because I didn't play for like 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks. Like, all right, that one's done. Like now we go. And the season has already started at this point. Like I'm missing games at this point. And then I had like a pretty minor like back injury that kind of took me out for 2 weeks ish, but nothing like super serious, didn't require surgery, anything like that. And then I finally was back, and I played a couple really, really good matches right towards the end of the regular season. I like finally kind of like broke into the starting lineup. I played had a couple really nice games statistically. My coach was kind of like noticing, like, all right, nice, Dalton's back. Like this is the guy that I signed, right? And right around Christmas time, I started feeling that pain in my ankle again, the same one that I injured over the summer. And I was like, all right, well, that's not a great sign. But yeah, at first I was kind of like, I'm a volleyball player. I've had knee problems before, jumpers knee. Probably everybody's had that at some point.
Yep.
That's kind of what I thought it was. That's kind of what I thought it was at first. Like I said, it would come and go during practice. When I would get a good warm up in, it'd be fine. And then kind of slowly, it started getting worse, which is not good for any injury, right? And I'm doing all these exercises to kind of help strengthen my ankle that I had been doing, like, since that initial injury. And it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And I was kind of just really trying to play on it. I mean, I was taking painkillers every single day for training. And at some point I kind of just like pulled my coach aside and was like, it's pretty unhealthy, like what I'm having to do in order to train right now. Like I'm in a ton of pain. I'm taking painkillers every day, which is not good for you at all.
Right.
Especially not every single day. And I mean, I was taking like a gram of ibuprofen a day, which is
way too
crazy.
much. Yeah, right.
Way too much. Right.
Daily. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I kind of had that conversation with him. I was like, I think I really need to get like X-ray, MRI, and just see if there's something structurally wrong. And so, I just pretty much stopped training at that point, scheduled the MRI and all that stuff. And eventually they found that it's a kind of like a difficult injury to explain, but basically the cartilage between the ankle joints, so like my foot and my shin bone, had kind of like deteriorated a little bit. So basically it was kind of just bone grinding on bone, and it created like bone spurs, which was kind of like the source of the pain.
Okay.
And basically, the cartilage just like wasn't really doing its job there anymore. And so I had never really thought of this or like heard about this as an injury before, right? Usually it's like broken bone, torn ligament, torn tendon. I'm like, cartilage.
A little more cut and dry. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't even know what the protocol for that is. And so
do you have trainers out there?
Yeah. So we have, we have 3 physiotherapists, and then we have kind of like I call it the medical army of just, we have a shoulder specialist, we have a knee specialist, we have a foot and ankle specialist. Oh, wow. Everybody that's affiliated with the club, that you can get an appointment with them, and they'll see you next day. Got it. So it's really, really fast here. And in Germany, it's healthcare is completely socialized. So we're completely insured through everything, and we can get just about anything through our health insurance, which is, really, really nice. Right. And so I get the results for the MRI. I go to see this foot and ankle specialist, and he kind of says, what I just told you is like, there's a problem with the cartilage. We're going to send you to this like really professional facility in Hamburg, which is about an hour to the north of where I'm living, big city. And they're like, this is, someone there will probably know exactly what we need to do. So I go there. They tell me that they have to do this procedure called microfracturing, which is basically that little space where the cartilage is kind of not there anymore. They fracture the bone with like a tiny drill to basically stimulate growth of new tissue in that kind of pocket to kind of like fill that gap. And so basically they're breaking bones, right? So it's a pretty long healing process, and cartilage takes a really, really, really long time to regenerate. It's just one of those things, like injuries that involve cartilage just take a long time to heal. And so I kind of sit down there, and at this point I have no idea of the timeline. I'm like, it could be a couple of weeks, it could be longer. And he kind of tells me it's going to be like between 6 and 9 months until you're back. I'm like, shit, there goes the rest of my season. And I was just like, you gotta be kidding me. Cause like I said, I had just broken into the starting lineup. I was playing good matches. I was really excited to finally be back on the court. I was playing volleyball again. I was happy. I'm like, yes. And then this happens. And I'm like, dude, not something like just one thing after another. And that was definitely the biggest battle. Cause it wasn't just, it wasn't just one injury that, because injuries are common in sports. Right. Everybody will have them. Hopefully they're not too serious, but at some point it will happen. For me, it was just like out for a month, on for a couple of weeks, out for a month with something else, on for a couple of weeks, and then have like right before playoffs, basically, which is, the biggest part of the season. Right. Like, yeah, I'm out for the rest. Damn. And so for me, I was like, wow, this is really not how I wanted the season to go. Cause I kind of already had that season in Croatia where I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to Germany. This is my chance to kind of prove that, I'm good enough to play at a high level. And, maybe this was my opportunity to go and train with the US national team and things like that. And so it's kind of all these things just start falling apart, and you're like, man, this is really shitty. So right about that time, the club gave me the option. They're like, you can do the surgery here, or you can go home if there's a doctor back home that you trust with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to stay here in Germany and do the surgery here. There is a doctor that had done my foot surgery before. He's a foot and ankle expert in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of reached out to him, and I just asked him, like, I basically asked him, is this what you would do? Like this
Mm-hmm.
microfracturing procedure? He's like, yeah, no, I think it looks good.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had that trust from somebody that I had, seen before. And so I decided to stay in Germany. It was a conversation I had with my coach, and I kind of just told him, I kind of asked him, like, do you see the benefit of me staying here to do the surgery here and kind of do the recovery process here? And he kind of just gave me this answer that I kind of hope that I keep this identity as an athlete for a long time. He kind of just said, one of the best things you bring to this team is just like your energy and like the relationships you have with all the guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, we would love to have you like stay and just like be in the gym with us. And I was like, okay, sweet. Like, I'll stay. And I mean, that was such a big compliment from him. And so that's kind of what I did. I would kind of show up, first couple of weeks, I'm in a boot for 8 weeks on crutches.
Wow.
So it was rough.
That's tough.
Yeah. I've got guys helping me get groceries. I've got guys helping me, drive to different appointments and all this stuff. Everybody was a huge help to me. And I would kind of just come to training. First couple of weeks, I didn't really do anything because, just right after post-surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly what my coach said is what I try to do. I would try to joke around with the guys. I would come to the games and be the loudest guy in the crowd and just trying to kind of give the team everything that I could. Obviously I couldn't contribute statistically.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, I can still have a positive influence on how this season goes. And that's kind of the attitude I had. And I'm so glad I had that attitude because I think it helped me so much with my own recovery process and my own mental health of just like kind of changing my role on the team. And, looking back, I think if I had gone home and kind of just sat around at home for 3-4 months, just having my family do everything for me, man, I would have been in a much worse place.
Yeah, it definitely seems like you made the right choice there.
Yeah, no, I totally think I did. And plus, like I said, we have so many people surrounding the club that made the recovery process really, really nice, like doing physical therapy sessions, doing these like physiotherapy, like kind of just basically like massages and stuff like that to help me along with the recovery process. And but I think that for sure was kind of the biggest struggle with mental health in general, because you would just kind of, some days I would wake up and I'm motivated. I'm like, and I'm in a boot, but I could still do push-ups. I can still do crunches, man. Like I'm going to go work out. And then some days you kind of just wake up and you lay in bed and you're just like, oh my God, like I don't want to do anything today. Like this is so shitty. Like, and part of it, you're like, man, I don't know if this is the life for me anymore. I mean, it really does get to that point sometimes where you're like, man, do I really want to just like live this of being injured and like because as an athlete, as soon as I'm healthy again, there's still the chance that I'll get injured again right away. Right. There's no guarantee about any of that. There's no guarantee that I get myself back to a position that I can play at a high level after this injury. So I'm sitting there thinking like, man, after everything that's happened this season, like, I don't know, man, this has been so tough. And I kind of like had, like I said, I signed a 2-year contract here. So that was one thing that was very helpful for me, because if this was a 1-year contract, it would have been really, really difficult to get something for this season, this season that I'm in now. I mean, it would be next to impossible, at least to play in a good league again.
I want to hit on that a little bit. So, while you're dealing with these injuries, do you have any worry of being like cut or, I mean, it's pretty cutthroat. I mean, I know you had that second year on your deal, but did you ever have a worry of like, okay, your first year you're injured basically the whole, for a majority of the season. Then you get hurt again. I'm sure that conversation with your coach was, pretty relieving, but, how does that work? Do you have any worry creeping in during this time?
Yeah. So that was up until this point in my life, this was probably like one of the worst days of my life so far. Was the day that I get the call saying, yeah, it's going to need surgery. And then at this point, they kind of explained to me the procedure and how long I'll be out for. So I get this call in the morning and they're like, we're going to do surgery. You're going to be out for the rest of the season. About an hour and a half later, I get a call from my agent and she goes, hey, I talked to your coach today. They are having a conversation with like the other members of the club about whether or not to keep you for next season.
Wow.
And so I get both these phone calls within like 2 hours of each other. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck, man?
Yeah. Right.
Like, you gotta be fucking kidding. Like, I was pissed. I was sad. Like, I didn't even, I called my family. I'm just like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I have no idea what to do now.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day actually is when I had that conversation with my coach about whether I wanted to stay here for the surgery or go home.
Mm-hmm.
And then my agent calls me that night and she says, I heard about this conversation that, you had with your coach. And I guess he just, from that conversation, decided like, he's just the type of guy that we're going to take the gamble on. And he's the type of guy that we love having him in the gym, even while he's injured. So we're going to take the gamble that he'll get back to, 100%. And during the season where I was playing,
mm-hmm.
they could see that I was a really hard worker. They could see that I was, constantly trying to improve. And
mm-hmm.
like that personality isn't going to go anywhere.
Right.
And so like, we'll take the gamble. We'll take the gamble that he gets back healthy. And I think they had a lot of confidence in me that I do get back healthy. And so it was kind of like a really emotional couple of days. Like,
I can imagine. Yeah.
Going from playing to out for the rest of the season, maybe not have a contract next season, to surgery, and then still have the contract. It was like a lot of ups and downs. And so, yeah, there definitely was that conversation. And I'm very lucky to be in a place like Germany for this, to be honest, because when you get injured, even as an athlete, the government takes over paying your salary.
Wow.
So I didn't have to worry about not getting paid the rest of my salary. Basically, my club didn't really have to pay for me anymore, but I was still getting paid. Right.
So they're not losing money by having you on the team at that point.
Exactly. So there's no reason for them to cut me.
That's good.
And yeah, so I got really lucky because I've heard stories about guys getting cut for much, much less than that.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely there was that conversation, and I just so happened to be in a good situation that, I signed a 2-year contract. I had made a good impression with the coaches and people from the club. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the more difficult things about playing a professional sport is when you're in high school, when you're in college, it's kind of like, it's more of like a family, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're playing professionally, it's a business.
Yep.
I mean, at the end of the day, you're a number value. You're a statistical value. And it's different from team to team, of course. Some teams have a lot more personality and kind of like family oriented, and the club I'm on now is much more than other clubs I've been on. But when you look at some other clubs, it's like, it's a business, man. You got to show up and perform, otherwise you're gone. Yep. And yeah, so it was definitely really, really stressful time in my life, for sure.
How did you deal with that stress?
So one of the biggest ones was kind of like forcing myself to come to training. So I still went to training every single day. Okay. I went to all the liftings. I went to all the trainings. Even while I was injured, I would crutch in and say what's up to the boys. And I would kind of make fun of myself a little bit for being like, calling myself like a cripple or things like that. And
sure.
Like kind of showing my teammates like, yo, you can rib me a little bit. Like you can poke fun, you can have some banter. Yeah. And then this one was kind of like an interesting one for me. And looking back, it's kind of funny is I just destroyed my upper body every day weightlifting. And I put on like 10, 15 pounds of muscle, like just on my upper body. And I'm walking around, like the training shirts are like super tight on me now. And the guys are like, dude, you're getting kind of jacked. I'm like, yeah. So I kind of just put my focus on that. I would come in, and while they were training, I would just lift. I would just lift upper body. And so, I kind of just took my mind off it. It was something else to do and kind of like focus on. And it was kind of cool to see some improvement there and kind of see like my body change a little bit. And it was, I guess, like a goal. It doesn't really affect volleyball performance that much to be jacked, right?
Right.
But it was kind of just something I did. And then, I dialed in again on my nutrition. I started like counting calories and things like that, which I had kind of learned from like listening to a few different podcasts and doing my own research. And I thought, now's a good time to kind of like figure out what the best diet is for my body. Right. So I did a lot of experimentation with a bunch of different things. And then, during this time was kind of like when we were forming off the court. So it was a really unique time for me because up until this point, I hadn't really had any mental health issues that I could really put my finger on. And now I'm making this company where the main focus is mental health. And I'm like, damn, like my mental health is not very good right now from all this stuff that I'm looking at and all these things that I'm doing. And I think that really helped it kind of blossom into a passion for me. It's because I'm doing these things, and I think one of the biggest eye openers for me was it's kind of a stigma among athletes. I think especially male athletes,
absolutely,
you kind of just put it down, not talk about it. And so I'm kind of going through this brainstorming process. And that was one of the first things we identified as kind of this stigma around mental health of athletes. That's like, you just don't admit it. And then I would have these conversations with my two co-founders, Faye and James, and they'd be like, how's the recovery going? How's your mental health? And I would kind of just, yeah, I'm fine. It's like, nah, I'm good.
Yep.
And then I'm going through this process. I'm like, I'm totally like part of that stigma. Like, I'm definitely not fine. Like some days I wake up and I just don't want to get out of bed, like at all the whole day. And I'm like, I think that's what turned it into such a big passion for me now, was kind of going through it and taking a step back and like, like I have the problems that I'm trying to address 100%, like being able to say like, yeah, I'm not doing very well today. Like I'm freaking depressed. I got a ton of anxiety today. Like today sucks. And instead I would kind of just, even when I would talk to my family, like, how you doing? I'm good. I'm fine. Just cruising along, kind of just doing my thing. It's like, it's so difficult as an athlete, as a male athlete. And even while I'm doing this process of creating something where I'm encouraging people to talk about these things, I'm not doing it. And I think I was like, holy shit, man, what a freaking eye opener.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, like what you're saying, I could totally relate to. I mean, obviously with my podcast and everything, it's all about promoting mental health and mental health awareness, but that doesn't mean that, and like what you said, it doesn't mean that we've got all our shit figured out. We're still having those defense mechanisms of, I don't want to talk about it right now, or, when you're not fine, and it's perfectly okay. But it's, now that you've got, because, there's a difference too. And I really want to have you on because, and not to belittle you in any sense, like, it's not like you didn't grow up with like a mental illness, right? But there's so many people that, it's not all about, like everyone experiences bouts of anxiety, depression, things like ruminating thoughts. And now more than ever, people that, like yourself, or even like me, who has, generalized anxiety disorder and things like that, we can come together and help spread the word, because it's not about, I just want to help people that, have anxiety disorder. It's like, no, people like yourself, or people that are athletes that are just like, what the hell is going on with me? How can we make a difference to help just normalize it? Because everyone experiences mental health in just different, amounts, I guess I would say.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that not at all. You're not belittling me at all.
Right.
Cause that was one of the biggest observations that I had going through this process, is when I would have that one day where I'm like, man, I'm pretty like kind of depressed today.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would look back, I'm like, damn, there's people out there that feel like this every single day. Or, I would have those anxiety days. I'm like, there's people out there that have this every single day. And I'm like,
Yeah.
damn, that sucks, man. Like, and I'm thinking like, now with this project, like I want to figure out a way to help these people, because I'm going through it, and I'm like, if one day during the week I'm feeling like that, or one day a month I'm feeling like that, shoot, I'm going to want to not feel like that the next day. And so I'm looking at it like, for sure, there's people that have had, first of all, worse injuries than I've had. I mean, Faye is a great example. One of our co-founders, she had 2 ACL surgeries her senior year that totally, I mean, she totally like destroyed her career.
Right.
And so I'm looking at, people like her, and I'm like, man, like I'm going through this whole process and kind of going this mental health journey. And I'm looking around, I'm like, I'm definitely not alone. And there's people that are far, far worse than me. But I kind of looked at it not like, oh, poor them. I kind of looked at it like, I can help them with the things that I've learned from just going through these few experiences that I've had.
Exactly. Because now you have the empathy.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly.
And I've talked about with another guest, like, with COVID, it's like the first time that you would imagine almost everyone in the world suffered whether some bout of anxiety, depression, and it sucks. But at the same time, it's like, I'm kind of glad it happened, because now you guys can have some empathy for, all the people that are like, oh, mental health doesn't exist and all that. It's like, well, what you experience is exactly what everyone's talking about. So before we kind of get into our last couple of questions, I mean, what's some just general advice you'd have for someone that, may be struggling with their mental health?
Well, I think first and foremost, biggest piece of advice is, if it's severe, like see professional help, right? Anything that I can tell you, advice, like all these different things, at the end of the day, if you need help, you got to go get help. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we also talk about with Off the Court, is so many barriers between, like, just to use athletes as an example, between athletes and getting professional help, right? And the first and is what we just talked about, is that stigma of just not wanting to admit it. And then there's the issue of accessibility, there's the issue of money, there's the issue of, all these different things, and find a way to get past those barriers. And I think that's the biggest piece of advice I have before I give you any, like, do some breathing techniques or meditation. Like, if you need help, go get help. Like, if it's something that, I'm the kind of person that, if you can get it done without medication, then I think that's the right way to go. But I'm totally not against, like, dude, if you need to take medication to get what you have under control, if you need to go see a doctor, see a professional therapist or sports psychologist, something like that, 100% go do that. I'm a huge advocate for that. And I think for people kind of going through mental health issues, is experiment. I think there are, like, you go online, you can find 1,000 different ways to manage stress, 1,000 different ways to improve your mood, 1,000 different ways to kind of like calm down anxiety. And I think one of the biggest problems that I see with people is they try one thing, doesn't work, and they go back to doing what they did before. It's like, try 5, 6, 7, 10, 30 things, like, before, like, find something that works for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If going for a walk doesn't work for you, don't give up. Try something different. You know what I mean? And so I think and not only try new things, but keep trying things until something works, because you're going to be able to find new things to try, whether it's a new type of meditation, whether it's a new type of breathing technique, whether it's just picking up a new hobby. Maybe instead of coming home and plopping on the couch and watching Netflix, try to learn a new instrument, try to do some art, try to do photography, like, try things, and don't give up easily on finding things that kind of like help you with your mental health. For sure. I think that's the biggest piece of advice I can give, for sure.
It's perfect, man. And I think so many people can relate to that. You said, oh, you get on Google, there's so many things out there, and to be honest, some things might make your anxiety worse. But like that doesn't mean, like you said, you got to keep trying. I mean, I've been in this, battle for, shit, I'm 31. Like, I mean, consciously for probably 15 years, just trying to figure out how to feel better. And it's not one thing, it's not like you need to just build up that toolbox, those things that you can do where, maybe a breathing exercise makes sense in this moment, but maybe not the next time. So like, it's just the more we can learn. And the main thing I hear in there too is like, you got to do the work. Like this, seeking help or taking that first step is how you're going to get better. Sit on your ass watching Netflix, I mean, not saying it's not you can do that, but
if
don't do nothing.
Yeah.
Don't do nothing. Expect something to happen. So like, and that's like the whole part of anxious ambition is, people struggle with anxiety, depression, bouts of anxiety, but that's not what's going to define our lives and define reaching those goals. And I'm really glad you said that, because that's a perfect way to look at it. Just you have to try and try and try, and you will find something that helps you, and you may have to combine that with other things to help you. Maybe it's diet. I think that's a huge factor. Speaking of nutrition, I mean, personally, what's kind of like your nutrition like? Is there things you avoid?
Me personally, the only thing I really avoid is processed foods. So I kind of go for like a whole foods diet.
Sure.
And anybody that doesn't know what that is, like whatever that ingredient is, if it's one thing, then that's a whole food. Like an avocado is made out of avocado. Like, so I try to focus on things like that. I cut out like bread, pasta, all these things that are very processed meats. So I kind of try to stick to like lean chicken, fish, beef, ground beef, things like that. Tons of fruits and vegetables. I love, one thing that I really like doing, or no matter where I am, is trying to eat local as much as possible.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of research out there, recent research, that kind of shows like eating local is just really, really good for you. And kind of the time it takes to like ship food and things like that can actually like make the healthiness of it go down by probably a fraction of a percent. And I think it's really nice, especially for a guy like me who's living in Europe now. I'm going to eat what they grow here. I think it's a cool way to kind of like be a part of the culture, be a part of kind of like what the country does. And then I think a big thing for me is I absolutely love to cook. That's honestly one of the hobbies that I kind of picked up now that so my first season in Croatia, I actually got meals as part of my contract. So I would just go and eat at a restaurant every day.
Okay.
But now in Germany, I don't have that in my contract. So I cook all my meals.
Okay.
So I kind of have that freedom. I'm on my own. Like I can try a bunch of new things. And I absolutely love to cook. And I think one of the biggest things for me is variety. Like I'm always trying like to eat a new vegetable or like try a new recipe. Try to have like in the course of a day, like 2 different kinds of fruits, or 2 or 3 different kinds of vegetables, 2 or 3 different kinds of meats, like just keeping the variety really different. And then I think in general, like as an athlete, I try to eat pretty high protein, and then healthy fats, I think, is a big one too, like avocados, nuts, seeds, like olive oil, things like that. And then I usually try to eat most of the consumption of my carbs just like kind of centered around when I'm practicing.
Fair.
So I'll eat most of them before I go to training, and then a little bit more afterwards to kind of replenish. But yeah, I mean, I think just in general, whole foods is the way to go, because there's always things you can, it's easy to go to being vegan or vegetarian from that point. It's easy to go in the reverse, to just add meat back in. And yeah, I think eating whole foods is in my opinion the most consistent diet, because I'm not cutting out carbs.
Right.
I'm not cutting out anything. If there's something that I really, really crave, then I'm going to figure out how to make it myself. Right. So like one of the examples was I made some like burgers the other day, kind of just like ground beef burgers. And I was like, man, I really miss mayonnaise. Like really miss the taste of mayo. And I made it homemade. Like I went on Google, I was like, how do I make mayonnaise like homemade?
Hell yeah.
And so that's one of the things I've been doing too, is, just about anything you crave, you can make it with what you got. Like you can make it homemade with whole foods.
Mhm.
So I think it's really not a restrictive diet at all. And it's really healthy. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, honestly, I kind of needed that myself because, and I'll speak to this. So like my mental health, and I'm not, I mean, like for me, like if I avoid things like gluten and dairy, I absolutely feel better.
Mhm.
But like I'll say like, last couple of weeks, I've been kind of feeling shitty in general. And like, so I reach for those shitty foods and it's like this cycle.
Mhm.
So like being conscious of it too is really important. So like, I know, like, honestly, like, starting today, it's okay. I need to clean up my diet, because my mood's been, pretty low. My anxiety's been high. And instead of going, okay, let's just go hop on a new medication or something like that, it's like, okay, let's give myself the best chance to live healthy, to feel better before you just kind of jump into, I don't want to say the easy way, but just the more conventional way of just like hopping on a new medication. It's like everything you're saying, have your coping skills in place, have your nutrition in place, do everything you can to give yourself the best chance to live a mentally well and healthy life. So that's super important. I'm definitely gonna start cutting out some of this shit again because it just gets
Yeah.
so
And
convenient. And you get in that cycle, and it's like you gotta break free.
yeah, no, 100%. And I think diet's one of those things that's just always overlooked.
Oh yeah.
With anything, when it comes to performance, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to sleep. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, diet is crazy. And I think to your point, yeah, I mean, it makes you feel better so much. But I think, especially it's like somebody like me, I think often there's that anxiety that comes when you kind of have that little cheat meal. You're like, ah, man, I didn't really need to do that. But I've kind of also changed my mind a little bit about just having that every once in a while. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I want to have like a Snickers, like I'm
Right.
gonna go have a Snickers. Like I'm not gonna go crazy,
Right.
but I'm not gonna let that be like, oh man. I think the important piece is not letting it lead to more
Yep.
like kind of eating based on cravings, right? Because I think, and I think that's one of the biggest signs
Yeah.
of anxiety, depression is just crazy cravings, and it's like almost impossible to avoid them. And so I think definitely cleaning up your diet is one of the best ways, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion, and something that you should do first, no matter what. Like if you think you
Right.
need medication, 100%, like just try the diet first. Like no one's saying don't go for the medication. Like
Mm-hmm.
if the diet thing doesn't work, but try it. Like you never know. Like, and
Right.
at the end of the day, if it doesn't work for your anxiety, you're still going to be a lot healthier in every other part of your life if you switch up, clean up your diet. So
Exactly.
there's no situation that you lose in that changing up your diet.
Not at all. Not at all. So before we get into our last core questions, what's some of your goals right now? Because, we talk about, anxious ambition, one of the main things is, yeah, you've had your struggles and with your injuries and all that, mental hurdles. What are some of your goals right now? What are you trying to achieve with, maybe on the court? And I guess this is off the court. I just worked
Plug
right
the
in there,
name,
man.
baby. Let's go.
I didn't even
Yeah.
mean to plug
It
it.
just works itself right in the name.
Hey,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So yeah, I'll start with, I guess, for my volleyball career. I think my biggest goal right now is, I mentioned it before, but playing with the U.S. men's national team.
Okay.
I think that's kind of just like, play as an athlete, as a young athlete, as a college athlete, high school, any level, you dream of playing in like the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the pinnacle of athletics. Of you make it there, you're like, all right, I did something with athletics, right?
Yep.
And for me, I'm not going to sit here and say like I'll be in the next Olympics, but I think it's definitely a goal of mine, and I think it's far enough away that it's going to be a really, really difficult challenge to make it that far.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's doable. Like I really do think if I put 100% of like the work in, God forbid, like I really hope I stay healthy. So I think that's my goal. And like the next couple of summers, start training a little bit with the national team, maybe doing some of the other, like they do some like Pan American games,
Mm-hmm.
things like that, playing against like Canada and some teams in South America. And kind of just getting in the gym, and then hopefully come, Paris Olympics 2024, hopefully I can crack into the into the gym and be a part of that. I mean, that would just be really, really incredible. And then in terms of just my professional playing career, next year I probably will be in Germany again, just based on it's difficult to kind of move up after, last season I, didn't play at all. This season, still coming back a little bit from injuries towards the beginning. But I played a really good season so far, but to move up to a better league, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, you got to be one of the best players in the league.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully, probably not next year, but the year after that, I would love to go play in France or maybe Poland. And then kind of just continue my volleyball playing career. And then with off the court, what we're doing right now is kind of just like social media stuff. It's pretty difficult for us because the three of us are in drastically different time zones.
Right.
Like Faye's in Texas, so she's 7 hours from me. And then
Mm-hmm.
James is in Hawaii, so he's like 13 hours behind me. So it's, 7 hours between the three of us. Like, so it's impossible to like get on calls and do, podcasts that all three of us can be on, to kind of like do all that timing and stuff is really difficult. So
Mm-hmm.
we kind of try to schedule a lot of like our big stuff for the summers, because it's just easier. Like we can be together in person,
Mm-hmm.
maybe travel around,
maybe batch some stuff together. Yeah.
So right now it's a lot of just kind of like posting on social media, posting a lot of like different tips and stuff. And one thing we're going to start doing pretty soon is doing like a featured athlete every week. So we're going to select an athlete, and it's any sport. Like the three of us are all volleyball players, but
Mm-hmm.
kind of the end goal for off the court is for it to be for all athletes. Like we don't want to shut out like you play basketball, we're not going to
discriminate.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the end. And obviously volleyball was the easiest way to go because of who the three of us are
Mm-hmm.
for starting. So basically we're going to have like every week, do a nice bio with the featured athlete. And then do like some content during the week. Like we love doing like a mental health tip on Monday, a nutrition tip on Wednesday, and then a recovery tip on Friday. That's kind of like the typical like week for us. And then Tuesday, Thursday, we do a lot of kind of like more educational stuff, like article reviews and things like that. And then we also add in kind of like a lot of humor to it. I think that was one of the
It's definitely not dry. Yeah, it's not dry.
Yeah.
It's not like...
One of the most important parts for us, because we're like, we don't really want to sit here and just preach about you got to do this to do it. Like we're athletes, like some days you don't want to do the thing that helps your mental health. Like some days you just want to flop down on the couch and we're like, we're humans. Like, so we try to keep a lot of, I guess, humor and kind of like relatability in our content. And then, so we'll have that feature athlete post kind of their three. And I think that'll be really interesting to see maybe somebody from the sport that you play, like what do they do to manage stress? How do they eat? How do they recover? And then having them do kind of like an Instagram takeover, hopefully on like a game day would be ideal. To kind of see the mental preparations, the nutritional preparations, recovery, everything for how they prepare to do a game, which is, peak performance. You should be peak performance. So that's kind of our next thing that we've got lined up. Hopefully be starting that in the next week or two. And then over the summer, we do a lot of volleyball clinics, because kind of like I said, we're three volleyball people. That was kind of just an easy way for us to get the word out. Last summer we did Hawaii, Dallas, and we did one in Chicago. Hopefully we'll be adding a couple locations this year. I know for sure we'll do a couple in Northern California, a couple in Southern California, possibly like Nashville area, maybe Atlanta, something like that. So hopefully doing some more clinics. And kind of the way we structure that is we do like 1-2 hours of straight up volleyball skills clinics. And then we do like a little 30-minute to an hour presentation at the end of kind of what off the court is. And it was really cool to get, we do that presentation for athletes and parents. We invite the parents to come and sit and listen to, because, at the kid, a 13-year-old kid is not going to really understand everything that we say. I mean, you'd be surprised how much younger it is when kids start to have these mental health issues, with with social media being such a prevalent thing now. I mean, I remember we had one of our clinics in Dallas, and we had this like 13-year-old girl who was training with us, and in the middle of, or no, it was kind of, I think at the end of it, her mom pulled me and James aside or me and Faye aside while James was still coaching. And she said, this is my daughter. She's been, kind of having some problems. She's been doing like self-harm and things like that. And I'm like, at 13, like, holy shit. Like and it was centered around like her problems were kind of centered around her performance in sports, which was the crazy thing to me.
Wow.
It's like, she would have a bad day of training, or like, her coach yelled at her or something like that, and she would go home and hurt herself. And I'm like, that is insane that it's that young. Like for me, it was kind of unexpected,
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. And so it became that much more important for us to kind of like give those presentations to the parents. And we got tons of amazing feedback, people saying like, yeah, no one talks about this. And my daughter had such a great time, and my son had such a great time. And as a parent, I appreciate so much. And we were getting some feedback about like, you guys should include this in your next talk. Or for us, it's like, yeah, we want all the advice we can get. Like, we're kind of just starting, and none of us are experts, which I think is an important thing to add. Like, okay, volleyball, I guess, I could be considered an expert at this point,
right?
For coaching kids. And like James is getting his master's in sports science, so he's an expert in that field. But when it comes to mental health, like I don't have a degree, anything like that. Like, I'm speaking 100% on research that I've done myself and my own experiences. And so we're like, all the advice we can get, like, let's absorb it, let's soak it up, let's try to incorporate everything that we hear. And so we did those events over the summer. And then, I think one thing we really want to try to start doing is kind of like jumping online with different teams, maybe like reaching out to coaches and be like, hey, could we give a presentation to your whole team? Or maybe like a whole athletic department. Maybe we can go do, like go to a high school and just get the whole athletic department and do like a presentation, kind of like a rundown of what we all talk about.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the biggest things that we talked about was, when you go and play, especially I think college is the best example. Like, when you go and play a college sport, you get 2 presentations at the beginning of the season. You get the Title IX, like the sexual harassment and all these things. And then you get the doping, like performance enhancement. Those are the 2 presentations you get at the beginning of the season. There's nothing about nutrition. There's nothing about recovery. There's nothing about mental health. When you go, and even when you go and get a physical, when you go and get your required physical, they don't check anything about your mental health or anything like that. We're like, this needs to really change. I mean, there should be a presentation to athletes saying, like, at the very bare minimum, like, here are the resources, right? Or here's the people that you can contact. Here's a hotline. Here's,
just something. So
anything.
Prehistoric.
Yeah.
They're just trying to get you not break the rules.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And going through and reaching out to a bunch of different colleges and seeing how many colleges don't have a professional, either sports psychologist, therapist on campus for athletes to use, or even like a nutritionist. Like, I went to a Division I school and I didn't have that. I didn't have a sports psychologist. And so I'm like, I'm thinking, like, if I didn't have it, then I highly doubt, like, D2, D3, NAIA, club sports, high school, like, they're not going to have that stuff. And so, we're kind of just trying to mix that up and kind of just get people talking about kind of changing these different things. And then I think our biggest goal, which I think is probably pretty long-term at the moment, is to kind of create an app that kind of just brings everything together, kind of just a bunch of different avenues on there. I think one of the main pieces we want is, you kind of go on this app and you can get contacted with a therapist, like a professional, right away online. We want to, like, create ways to make it more affordable for athletes, because I think that's a big one. Yeah. If you're a college athlete,
right,
like, you don't have time for a job, like, you're in school and sports, like, and I mean, therapy is hundreds of dollars per session. And I'm like,
hey, you're not going just once. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like you're
right.
not going to be better after just one time. And it's going to be hard to say, like, can I really afford, I don't know, $500 to $1,000 a
Right.
month on therapy? Like I can't afford that.
No.
And so
Right.
we want to make it more affordable. We want to make it more accessible, that you can do it online. We kind of want to create almost like a not really more of like but I guess like a forum kind of, where you can go in this forum and you say,
A community.
you can,
yeah,
like a community where you can go in there and say, I'm a basketball player, I'm a college sophomore, I'm experiencing anxiety. And then you can have somebody else, like, or, maybe it's a volleyball player that's experiencing anxiety around an injury. And I can jump on there and be like, hey man, like, let's talk, let's chat. And because I think that's one other, I think a lot of athletes would be more receptive to talking to another athlete than maybe a professional. Because talking to a therapist can be intimidating for a lot of people. They're like, I don't know if I really want to go that whole route. But if it's kind of more almost like talking like to a teammate, then I think there's a lot of athletes out there that would be a lot more receptive to that. And maybe that's the push they need to say, oh, it's not that bad talking about this stuff. Like maybe I will go see a therapist. Maybe I will go get help. And then of course we want to add in, like nutrition in there too. We want to be able to kind of like make meal plans, I guess, based on different sports, and recovery as well. Like we want to add a bunch of different like mobility seminars, flexibility, different things like that, like how to maximize sleep, like all these different things. And we just want to create this kind of interface where you're an athlete. You can just go on there if you want to chat about the anxiety you're having. If you don't know what to have for dinner that evening, you can jump on there. If you have a huge game coming up and your body's not feeling good, like maybe your shoulder's bugging you, jump on there and say you're having, like, you can find one of these resources. And so that's, I think, our end goal. And it's going to take a ton of planning, and definitely need to get a lot more people involved to kind of really make that high quality.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's our end goal. And I think one of the biggest things that, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing with Anxious Ambition, is we kind of agreed, the three of us, like, this is something that we would do for free.
Exactly.
100%. If there's a way for us to make money from off the court, then hell yeah, let's do that. Right. But at the end of the day, like, we'll do it for free. Like, this is something that me as an athlete, I'm looking at all these things like, oh, that'd be pretty nice to have. Oh, that'd be pretty cool to be able to talk to somebody. Like, these are the things that I recognize is needed in athletics. And so for sure, it's something we'll do for free. Giving advice for whatever we can, like connecting people, and just having that ability, and kind of just, in the most broad sense, kind of just trying to change that stigma of athletics, and not admitting, like, you have this, I'm an athlete, I'm not allowed to be depressed. Like, it's just not the way it is. Right. And so that's, I think, the biggest thing that we want to change. And I think it's big for us, because I think the three of us are so passionate about it now. And I think it's so cool that, you get in, once we got into this space, we kind of see how much there already is out there. We're like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I had no idea that there was this many other people like talking about mental health already. Once you finally kind of enter that world, and we want that world to be much easier to get into, is I think a big thing for us. So yeah, we've got a lot of big ideas, big goals, but I think we're pretty okay with kind of taking it slow and making sure that everything's high quality. And I think a big thing for us is taking the time to, like, if somebody reaches out to us, and like we've had a couple of Zoom calls in these past few years, that someone reaches out to us on Instagram and says, hey, like, I tore my ACL a couple of weeks ago and I'm really not doing well with it. Like, can I like talk to you guys about like different things we can do? That, like, think conversations like that will be a priority for us 100%, for like, because that's the really bare bones, like, what we are trying to do before we sell merchandise or, do all these
Sure.
different things. Like at the end of like, cause all that stuff's important. Like, don't get me wrong, but
Right.
that kind of like conversation, one-on-one conversation is kind of like the very bottom priority, or top priority, I should say. But bare bones, like that's the stuff that we will never be skipping,
Right.
or we'll never allow that to be not high quality stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously you guys' vision, I mean, the vision's there, man. Like and honestly, none of the goals are like, I want to say they're all obtainable. You guys have the framework, and it's really, it's the sky's the limit with what you're talking about, because it's seriously something that's needed in this space of sports, and something I wish I had.
Yeah.
Especially now with, kids being, they know what the word anxiety is. They heard depression, and resources like that, and like those stories you get from like the parents, like you talked about doing it for free, like that's so rewarding. And having that like it being more of a passion project, I mean, you're going to succeed in it, because you do it, like you said, you do something you would do for free. Eventually, you're putting so much passion into it that people are going to start paying for your services, or donate and things like that. So honestly, I commend you guys for what you're doing, because it's, and a lot of people talk, but you guys are actually doing it, especially with the clinics, man, because that's huge. I mean, it's not like those kids didn't sign up for that 30-minute mental health thing, but hey, you're here, this is what you're going to get. And hey, you guys need to learn this stuff. So I really commend you guys, man. I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
Really excited.
I really appreciate that a lot.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's go back to, like you said to yourself, it was like the second worst day of your life. You get those calls. If you can go back and kind of maybe have a conversation with yourself, give yourself some advice, what would it be?
Yeah. It's funny whenever I think about a question like that, like what would I say to myself?
Yeah.
And for some reason, I always like picture what my mom would say to me. Right. I don't know why that's always the thing that comes up, but like, she just has, I think anybody could relate to. Moms just have a way of kind of like making you feel like it actually is going to be all right,
Yeah.
And I think if I could go back to that day and I get off the second phone call with my agent where she kind of tells me, you might not be able to play next season, I would look at myself in the eye and be like, what is preventing you, like 100% preventing you from bouncing back from this? Is there anything that is like 100% saying to yourself that you won't come back from this? And the answer is no. Like, the injury isn't going to prevent me from coming back to playing sports. Maybe I'm not at the highest level that I was before, but if this injury isn't going to completely take my life away from sports, not having a contract in the same team isn't going to 100% crush my dreams of playing playing as a professional. At the end of the day, like I could go back to one of these, kind of beginning starter leagues like I did in Croatia and kind of just try to work my way back up. And so I kind of had that conversation with if I could go back, I would kind of tell myself like, look, man, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's going to be okay and it's going to be easy, but like, if you want to continue, you will be able to do it. There's nothing that's going to prevent you from doing it. And so I think not only that, but I think one of the biggest takeaways from this, and I wish I would have kind of noticed it sooner, maybe this would be something that I would tell myself, is thinking about how other people treat me now and how they support me now. Right? Because this was one of the biggest observations that I've had kind of entering this mental health space as like a person, like you said before, like I didn't grow up with clinical anxiety, clinical depression, anything like that, but I'm still a part of it. How I react to one of my teammates that's going through something is a part of this conversation as well. Right? So if I have a teammate that's going through an injury and I can tell that he's really depressed or he's going through a ton of anxiety one of these days, what I say to him, how I interact with him is just as much a part of breaking this stigma as it is for me to kind of like notice it in myself. And so I really wish I would have told myself like, hey, notice like what makes you feel better when people say it to you, kind of things like that. Like somebody, like I said before, like when guys joked around with me, like, hey, what's up, you cripple, like things like that. Like it sounds kind of harsh when I say like that, but like kind of just like that banter and stuff like that. Like it makes me laugh. Like it makes me feel better. And so I'm kind of looking at it like, all right, now I'm going to incorporate that next time I'm in a situation where somebody else is going through something. What am I going to do to help them? And I think that was a tough one to kind of learn this way. But I think it was something that every athlete needs to realize, because this whole conversation around mental health, especially in athletics, is not just people that are having mental health issues. Like it has to be everybody, really, because if you're a guy that you come out and you say, hey guys, I'm not feeling that great today. Like I'm feeling a lot of, I had an anxiety attack this morning, feeling pretty like fatigued. I'm feeling pretty depressed. And they're all just like, yeah, whatever, dude. Like that's not helping anything, right? Like, sure, it's great that I'm speaking about it, but their response and the cumulative response from the coaches, from parents, from teammates, from even administrators, like people surrounding the sport, like it's got to be everybody. And I mean, it's the exact same outside of athletics. Like this conversation on mental health is not just for people with mental health issues at all. I mean, it's for everybody. And I think, like you said before, COVID kind of opened everybody's eyes to like that kind of empathy that people I think were lacking for a long time. Is, damn, this sucks. Like being stuck at home all day and feeling trapped, feeling just like totally out of it. Like people feel like that every day with that are going through these mental health, even when everything is perfect, when we're not in quarantine, when we're not on lockdown. Like, so I think definitely I would have gone back and told myself, really notice like the things that, how people treat you now and how it makes you feel better about or maybe even worse. And maybe those are the conversations to try to avoid when you're talking to somebody going through something. Right. So yeah, probably those two things, just kind of saying, dude, like you're going to bounce back. It's if you really want to bounce back, you'll bounce back. And notice how like the other side of the conversation is now that you're on the side that you're not normally on. Right. Like, so yeah, definitely those two things would be huge for me.
Well, it's huge. It's huge. I love what you said about, like you said, realize like the empathy part, so you can help others because like you mentioned, it's not all about the people that are struggling clinically. It's everyone getting on the same page, or at least having one guy in the room. Like if you were in the room and could step up and say, hey, like I totally know what you're, going through. I've been there. And now you have at least one friend, even if everyone else in the room may not get it yet. It legitimizes, because what a lot of people struggle with is, when they do, and I advise a lot of people, like, first step to, I think, getting help and feeling better is admitting what you have going on, telling people, whether it's posting on Instagram or, writing a letter to your parents or whatever it is. But it's important that you don't just get shut down when you do that, totally. Oh, shake it off. What do you got to be stressed about and all that shit? It's like, okay, now I'm just going to go back to like, I'll just go fuck myself and no one's going to help me. And you're like, it's people like you and, everyone, like, have that empathy because this is real. So that's really important. I'm really glad you're doing that. And it's amazing, man. So before our last question, where can people find you at, personal page, off the court? Where can they find you?
So I'm on most social medias, Facebook, Instagram, search Dalton Solbrig and you should be able to find me.
Okay.
And then off the court, we do Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We have we have a YouTube channel. If you find us on any of those platforms, for sure, throw us a follow, check out our content, drop some likes and comments on anything that you want. And then, throw us advice. Like if there's something you see that you think we should address or you think is a good idea for us, like absolutely reach out. Like, and also if you're somebody who just wants to talk to us, like if you're a young athlete and you see this Anxious Ambition podcast and you want to reach out to me personally, like totally reach out. I'll try to set up a call with you, maybe just with me, maybe with Faye and James, my partners too, about anything, nutrition, recovery as well. It doesn't have to just be mental health stuff. And then, yeah, I think usually on my Instagram, I'll post pretty often about like live streams for my games if you ever want to watch me play. And yeah, I think just stay tuned for some content that we have coming up. Like I said, we do a lot of stuff over the summer. If you're an athlete, we're going to hopefully expand this summer to doing some stuff with different sports, maybe not specific skills with those sports, but kind of doing some maybe like mental health workshops and nutrition recovery, different things like that. So be on the lookout for that kind of stuff if you're interested. And if we're coming to your area. And then also if you're an athlete, once we start doing these featured athlete weeks and you would like to be an athlete featured on there, like totally reach out to us, because we're going to hopefully just be doing a new one every week. So we're going to need a lot of fresh faces.
Oh yeah. I mean, they're a great follow too. Like no bullshit. Like, when you hear of people doing like mental health stuff, you get like those very clinical pages and it's like, this is so boring. How are we supposed to make a difference? But like all your stuff, it's entertaining. It's funny. It's factual. It's, it's the perfect mix. I mean, it's not dry. So if you're an athlete, or even if you're not an athlete, like check out their page. There's a lot of great information that you can use in your everyday life. All right, we're gonna get to our last question. How do you want to be remembered, Dalton?
Good question. Yeah, I know. I thought about this a lot because one of the biggest things about living away from friends and family for most of the year is it's sometimes pretty difficult to stay in touch with people. And that's one of the things that one of the biggest like recent goals of mine is just like once a week. Maybe sometimes I try to pick a day, like every Saturday, maybe every Sunday, go and just text one of my buddies from high school. Be like, hey man, how you doing? Or one of my teammates that I play with at Hawaii, or one of my cousins, just trying to stay in touch with people. And I definitely with off the court, I want to be remembered as this guy who, kind of created this thing that he was so passionate about, helped a ton of, I want to be known as the guy who helped a ton of athletes through something, or helped them just improve their performance in their sport by taking care of these other things. In volleyball, I definitely want to remember it as a great player. But I think for me, in my opinion, I'm already like, when I get to tell my kids that I played a professional sport like one day. So I think that part's already there, like box checked, and I played at a high level. I got to live a lot of people's dreams, and I think that's such a huge blessing for me. But I think the biggest one for me is I don't want to be known as that guy. Like, yeah, he kind of just lost touch with him after a couple of years. You know what I mean? And I think it's so easy for that to happen. And I think that's the trap. It's so easy just to kind of like, you move somewhere new, you get a new job, you get a new group of friends, and then you kind of just, everybody else kind of just goes to the wayside. And seeing some, it just, one of the biggest things that like breaks my heart is when, kids, for example, like they aren't in contact with parents anymore, aren't in contact with siblings anymore, things like that. And that stuff just drives me crazy. And I don't want that to ever happen. So I think I really want to be known as that guy. It's like, oh yeah, he was always down to chat, like always down for a conversation. I want to be the guy that's I go back to my high school reunions and everybody's like, oh, Dalt, like, what's up, man? Like, It's awesome that you've kept in touch with us after all these years. And, cause I think that's so like, it's so, rewarding. And it's kind of cliche, but I don't want to be remembered as somebody who was too worried about material things or, cause everybody says that, but, I think taking care of relationships, I want to be known as the guy that was like, yeah, he really put the work in to make sure everybody, he kept in touch with people that he cared about and didn't let any of those relationships fade away unless they needed to, I guess, is
Sure.
the best way of putting it. Sometimes there's people
yeah.
that just need to be out of your life. Right. So, but yeah, that's one thing I definitely want to be remembered as. And yeah, I just want to leave something behind. And I think with off the court is the biggest one for me. I want to, by the time I'm dead and gone, I want this whole conversation of, mental health around, especially in sports, but I think in general, to just be normal. I want it to be normal. I don't want it to be like a conversation that people are afraid of having. I don't want it to be a conversation that people avoid. I want it to be, by the time I'm gone, I want it to be like, it's something you talk about every day. It's something you talk about in practice. It's something your coach talks to you, every player, about before a game, or, things like, or whatever you need. I just want it to be, I don't want athletes to be scared to admit it anymore, or not just athletes. I get in that mentality because that's kind of what we do with off the court. But I mean, anybody, you should be able to admit it.
Right.
I don't want people to be afraid to say that they need help. That's because you're not going to get it otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you're doing is contributing to that. So that's amazing, man. The more you guys promote off the court, and, I just want to say, thank you for being, thanks, Dalton, for being so vulnerable, sharing your story, being, an ally in this mental health ending of the stigma. Because like we mentioned, it's not, for someone that isn't clinically ill, there's no reason for you to, I mean, you could have just said, walked by, went through your anxiety, depression, just kept it moving. But you're you're doing, you put in the work to help other people so they don't have to experience that, and how you can help them, get out of it. And it's, it's awesome, man. I want to applaud you. Part of this season of the podcast, I really wanted to have only men on for that reason, to just get more stories out there, because it is a problem for men to talk about it, especially athletes. We're just oh, you're a bitch, suck it up. And it's you're, honestly, you're the bitch if you're not being vulnerable and talking about yourself and being your true self, because we need to be more open. And, stories like yours, it makes it a lot easier for someone else. And, if someone out there, athletes especially, check out Off the Court, because this is something that's going to be super value for you. It's something that I wish I had in school, because I went to an NAIA school, and supposedly we did have a counselor, but let's be honest, I had no idea.
Right.
No one had any idea. Looking back, I can say we all, a lot of people needed help, but just wasn't there and it wasn't available. So what you're doing, it's definitely contributing to ending the stigma around mental health. Yeah. And thank you so much for what you do, man. I mean, I just love seeing all these different pages and everything. And, it's nice to have a couple connections with you, with Larry and Max, and just knowing people that are trying to make a difference here. And I think I appreciate it so much, because now that I'm, kind of trying to build something up too, I understand how difficult it is. And for you to come on and talk about mental health as a male athlete every time you do the podcast, I mean, that's really something that it's something that's just needs to happen. And it's difficult. I mean, I'm sure you experienced that even doing your Anxious Ambition podcast, it's not easy to be vulnerable, just in any sense of the word. And then you add all these different kind of stereotypes, I guess is the word that comes to mind. I don't know if that's the right word, but being a guy, being an athlete, these things that make it more difficult just based on how society looks at you. Yeah, man, I applaud you. I mean, it's incredible for you to do this once a week and multiple times a day with posting and things like that. Oh man, it's, like I said before, it's difficult for me to even do it once while I'm creating a company for that. Right. So, well, thank you. Appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yeah, man, absolutely. Thanks everyone for listening. And until next time, appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Anxious Ambition podcast. You can find us on all podcast platforms. follow us on Instagram at Anxious Ambition. You can actually watch this podcast over on YouTube. Lastly, check out our website, anxiousambition.com, where we have all of our merch, and a portion of every sale is donated to NAMI, and it helps support the individuals and their families who are suffering from mental illness. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, take it easy.
Anxious. Ambition.